Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. In this episode, Dorsey interviews another special guest that will give you hope and inspire you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining me on that episode of the Dorsey Ross Show. Today, we have a special guest with us. Her name is Anna McLaughlin. She is a grateful wife, homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, and most importantly, redeemed and transformed child of the Most High God. In her 20s, Anna reached a place of deep brokenness. From that point, the Lord has taken her on a journey to rebuild foundations, heal wounds, and come to trust in the deep, abiding love of God He has for His children. Anna loves nothing more than encouraging Proverbs 31 women to be faithful in little and set over more, as the parable of the talents calls us to do. Anna is an avid collector of wisdom, builder of communities, and encourager of souls. You can find her serving within the 4 walls of her home as she homeschools her children, and in her she considers a field community which equips women to be faithful in the little things and set over more through an intimate connection with the Father, that we might serve from fullness, never lack. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Dorsey. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, as I always do, I always ask a couple of easy questions before I get into more of your story. And one of the questions I have is, what's your favorite thing to do to relax?
Probably my favorite thing to do to relax is I love to watch an old movie. So my husband loves all things 80s, and I grew up the same way, actually. So we like to grab a little we actually just watched with my kids The Mighty Ducks today, which is early 90s technically. Little Giants was on the docket earlier this week. We made the mistake of watching Gremlins, which terrified my 11-year-old, so I do not recommend. But that's our favorite way to do downtime. We've got quite the brood with our 4 kids from 5 to 11, and so anything where everybody's engaged and excited is always a good thing.
Yeah. Have you watched the Back to the Future yet with them, with your kids?
Oh, not with the kids. My husband and I revisited Back to the Future a few years ago, but yeah, I think the kids are probably ready for Back to the Future. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Yeah, I just watched the Michael J. Fox documentary on Apple TV,
Yep.
and they were talking about that and whatnot.
I heard it was wonderful that he really just had such a gracious spirit in the face of his challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What books are you reading right now besides the Bible?
Yep. So I usually have quite the collection going. So I'm reading Gentle and Lowly. We're actually going through that as a book study with my She Considers a Field community, and that's by Dale Ortland. It's a beautiful book about the love of God and just his heart for us. Also going through a book called Choosing Rest by Sally Breedlove, which is it's one of my, I call them my shortlist books, the books that I'm just planning on revisiting over and over in my life. And this one is about finding the true abiding rest of God, no matter your circumstances. And she doesn't play. She goes through grief and loss. She goes through relational turmoil. She goes through pains and just all the challenges that we face in our life, suffering, and takes it head on and says, how can we find rest in this moment? So those are a couple that I'm reading. I also have a friend who's writing a fiction book, and I'm going to be reading her kind of rough completed draft in a couple of weeks. So I cannot wait to dig into a little bit of fiction reading and read what she's created.
Oh, awesome. Tell us a little bit about your story and about what you've been through and how you've came through that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I was raised in a non-Christian home. I was the youngest of 2, and then my dad adopted a baby right when I was headed off to college. And I would say a lot of what I've the deepest challenges in my life were self-inflicted, and I think there are probably some people who can resonate with that. I was a deep feeler. My parents divorced when I was 11, and then there was this season with a lot of change that left me feeling very unmoored. So between the ages of 11 and 14, my parents divorced. My dad quickly remarried. We did joint custody, and then when I was 13, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and was then paralyzed through the result of complications from his chemotherapy. He was in an experimental round of chemo. So in these formative years of the kind of early teens, I found myself going through multiple changes in our family structure. And as a result, just feeling I was already very dramatic, a big feeler, lots of emotions, and then feeling completely isolated and alone. As much as my parents loved me, the circumstances that they were going through were just more than they could navigate. And I kind of felt that I had gotten lost in the shuffle. And so I started just kind of looking for love in all the wrong places. I became very self-destructive. And although academically I kind of made my way through all right, in my early 20s, I kind of reached a place of brokenness where life looked okay on the outside. I was in law school. I had the promise of a good job offer after I got out, but I was just so deeply lost. I didn't know how to resolve relational challenges when they came. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to be steady and consistent. And so I spent a summer asking the Lord, can you just take my life? I don't know where to go from here. I feel completely lost. And I just don't know how to live. It seems like everybody around me knows how to live, and I don't know how to live. So obviously he didn't take me out. He didn't take my life. And so from there kind of came this reckoning where I said, God, if you will not take my life, fall me back in love with you. Because by that point, I think when we go through a crisis of identity, we also oftentimes go through a crisis of faith. Because why would I be, if God is true, because I'd been a Christian since I was about 11, if God is true, why does life look like this? Why am I so messy? Why I want to be healed. I want to be whole. I want to be effective. We can get these fiery passions. Like we start out so fiery and so passionate for the Lord. I want to change the world for you, Lord. And then it's like, I can't even have a healthy relationship with my family members. What do I do with this? And so, what I've learned kind of looking back on the past about 17 or 18 years since that darkest of times is that so often my husband likes to say, we want the burning bush. And really he just gives us the next pebble on the path, the next little place to put our feet. And he wants the intimacy of a brick by brick rebuilding, which is what he's done for me.
Yeah. And what happened after that time? How did you come back to, loving God, and how did you come back into a passionate relationship with Him?
Yes. So there were some kind of key pieces that happened. I had already had, my dad was a psychologist, so there was already this bent towards personal development and mental health. And so I did things like therapy, but I also did some things that from my faith tradition were a little bit more of a stretch. Like I went through inner healing prayer and deliverance ministry, and both of those had a profound impact on my healing. I had seasons where I would do fasting. I had seasons where I would read. I've done Bible reading focuses where I would read the whole Bible in like a 9-month period of time. Just so those were kind of the big things, but then so much of it was just this continued daily, weekly, monthly, intentional focus of I'm going to put myself in the way of knowing you more, God, having that daily prayer time, that daily time in scripture, to just trust that on the other side of those, and that's what we talk about in She Considers a Field, it's the little things that compound to create eternal change in our lives.
When you're in a place of brokenness, where do you even start to find wholeness?
Mm-hmm. I think so often, one of the things that I did that I think was was erroneous was I kept looking for the answer, right? What is but always looking for the answer on the ground in the horizontal, I like to say. So I was looking for, the book, the psychologist, the prayer ministry, and I thought there was just a person or thing outside of myself that would give me the resolution I was looking for. And ultimately, what the Lord calls us to is a vertical orientation, that we look up and we say, I don't know what to do from here. And one of the things that Gentle and Lowly, the book that we're going through, and She Considers a Field, talks about that I love so much is it talks about, the Lord didn't come for the healthy. It says he says, I'm like a physician. I came for the sick, right? I came for the people who know that they need me. And that when we are in our deepest pit, we kind of think, well, I got to scramble up the wall a little bit so that God can get to me. And it's exactly the opposite. The deeper we feel like we've fallen, the deeper his love for us to heal us in that place. And the more assurance that he is right there. Sometimes on the other side, it feels like there's a wall between us, but he's right there. And whether we can hear, whether we can see him, so often if we can't, it's because our own backs are turned, not because he's not present. So it always starts with orienting our gaze up. And it starts with trusting, I think especially in this day and age, we like to think we're unicorns. We're the only one who has this, we're the only one as bad as us. We're the only one outside of God's reach. And if we can get solid on the fact that there has been countless tens of thousands of saints that have gone before us that have common sins and failings, and if God could reach them, he can reach us too. And he knows what to do to bring us back to his embrace.
Amen. When a woman starts to find that place of wholeness and abundance, how does she balance her calling to serve her family with opportunities outside of the home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is something that I've wrestled with a lot. I was a corporate lawyer for 5.5 years, and really felt in that time this division within me. And I can't speak for everybody's experience, but for our family, so my husband worked outside the home, I worked outside the home, and it felt like we were building someone else's towers, that there was this tiny little house that was our home that we wanted to nurture and love and tend to, and instead we were out building someone else's dream all day long. And so it's been helpful for us. We've since both come home and have become entrepreneurs, and really we are very clear as a family and as a couple that our kind of I call it the hierarchy of covenants, that our responsibility is first to the Lord, and then my husband and I's responsibility is to each other because we are in the covenant of marriage, and then it's to our children because we entered into a covenant through baptizing our children to raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and that only after those three hierarchies those three covenants are tended to, do we look outside. And so we try to be really intentional as a family for my husband and I to have time to connect, to just talk every morning. And when he comes home in the middle of the day, to talk again, how are you? What's going on? To connect with the children. That's part of why I homeschool, is so we can have that time together. And then after that, the business follows from there, because each of those buckets, spouse, children, and career could take all of us if we'd let them. And so having that proper orientation from the beginning, I really feel like a woman's heart is most at rest when it's oriented towards home. Doesn't mean we don't want to get a shower without anybody busting in on us sometimes, but at least we have that sense of commitment. This is where I belong. These are the people that I have given myself to.
Right, and you need that proper balance as well.
Yes, and boundaries.
And boundaries.
I'll tell my kids sometimes, like when you and I were going to have this conversation, I was like, the door is locking. It is being locked. You cannot come in.
You talk about having a proper balance, and you also talk about, the hats that you wear as well. And your husband probably wears, many hats as well. How do you handle, and how do your husband handle, and how do you think men should handle the hats that we all wear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I want the formula, right? I used to tell the Lord, "Tell me what to do and I'll do it." And he doesn't work that way, which as much as I feel like he and I are at a point in our relationship where I can kind of be with the Lord like, "Why don't you just tell me? Just give me the rules. That's what I want." And he knows really what I want is him to the best of my ability. But it's every season has looked differently as far as if you snapped a picture of our calendar, how much time are we spending working, how much time are we spending, one-on-one time with our children, time with all of our children together. Sometimes it feels like, are we just kind of putting out one fire after another? We have a kiddo who's sick right now, and so life has mostly paused for the past 48 hours while we've tended to her and made sure that she's okay. I think keeping in mind that sense of order of we need strong relationships with the Lord. We need a strong marriage. We need to have a strong relationship with our children. This is our home is actually the most profound place of ministry that we have because it has generational impacts. That's very important to us. I like thinking of it in terms of deep and wide. There's a little kids song from at least back when I was growing up where we sang
Yeah,
about God's love flowing deep and wide. And I like to think about that in our ministries as well. The ministry in our home, it goes to, the Lord says he blesses the faithful to the thousandth generation. And so the more we can seek to be faithful in reflecting who God is to our children, the more potential there is for this impact into the generations that can be so expansive that we don't even really have a way of calculating it. And so that's our focus. That said, it can feel a little pie in the sky to say that. Like I remember my husband used to say, because I'm more of a visionary personality, he's very practical. He's like, Anna, we have to work. Remember, we have to work. It'd be great if we could just sit around all day and cuddle the kids and sing kumbaya. And so he always goes out and he does his business for about 2 to 3 hours a day, every work day. And that has created a lot of stability for us to know, okay, the mornings are designated to me homeschooling the children and him working. And we kind of get that out of the day first, or get that out of the way first. And then the afternoons are a little bit more free form. I work a little bit. He shepherds and takes care of the kids. And then we've moved in the past month. So right now I'm mostly tending the house in the afternoons as well. And so it's taken a lot of different forms, but I think having that idea of the core of our ministry is our family. And like my husband says, there's reality, we have to work. It's been really grounding for us as well.
right. What do you say to a woman who's struggling, who has tried all these things? And in that question, you say, tried all these things. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think that phrase has become so popular recently. I've tried all the things. I'm doing all the things. And we can often throw that phrase out as proof that actually it was everything because I said it was everything. And so often we can kind of build up this sense of, I think, again, it's that unicorn complex that we can fall into. Oh, surely if there were an answer, I would have found it by now. And we can start to catastrophize if I've been struggling. And I've had the stories. I mean, I became a Christian when I was 11. At 23, I was worse off than I was when I started. Like I was more dysfunctional. I was more broken. I was more lost and confused than I was when I first came to know the Lord. And so that can sound like a pretty desperate dead end story. 11 years, Lord, I've been trying, 12, whatever. I've been trying to seek you, and look, here's all I have to show for it: a broken heart, broken life, nothing to offer you, no health. And from that place, we can tend to despair, where we think we use it as a proof text to say, there's no hope. There's nowhere to go. If God really loved me, he would have done stuff by now. He would have saved me. He would have set me free. We can hear other people's stories of healing and redemption, and we take that snapshot and we use it as proof that God has abandoned us, that he doesn't care. Because if he had cared, he would have said yes by now. And I think it was hard for me to take, but at the end of the day, there's a measure of arrogance to that, right? Where it's like, who are we to say what the potter wants to do with our life. The Lord calls himself, I'm like the potter, and I make some vessels for common use and some for special use. And when we really, our clearest path to peace is when we can sit and go, not your will, but mine, or sorry, reverse that. Not my will, but yours, right? How much I want to say the other one, obviously. We want it to be our will and our timing, but he says, accept the lot that I've given you, which may mean today you are deeply broken, and I can use you here. And so that's the first thing I would say is he can actually use us in our brokenness. He can use us in our struggle and in our lostness. And I would not know and love him today like I do if I hadn't had that season that was decades long of really feeling like I don't know what you can make of my life. I don't know what I have to offer, and I'd really rather we just throw in the towel and just take me to glory. It's a dark place to be, but we forget too how things compound over time, and it's going to look like zero for a really long time. But he's a gardener, right? All the good stuff happens beneath the surface, and then it's
Right.
like, now it's time for spring.
Yeah. Sometimes I think when we're going through, and I think it depends on the situation and the people and,
Mm-hmm.
even our mental health sometimes, when we're going through a dark time and we're struggling with our faith and we're struggling with where is God in this situation, what would you say to people who may listen to this later and maybe going through that and may say, hey, God isn't here anymore. God's not, with me anymore. What would you say to, people who may listen to this later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just like you said, it's so circumstance driven and individual driven. What what does it look like? What is their particular story? And these are, when we're in that level of darkness, it's so important to have human eyes back to us to just reflect, I hear you. The pain is real. That feeling of lostness and brokenness is real. And having another person bear witness to that pain, like for me, I went to counseling for years, just having people sit and listen to me, and then gently, they're trained in this, gently uncover, hey, we think it's this dark, but what if there's some light ahead? What if there's a purpose beneath all of this pain? And ultimately, when we're feeling like there's no hope, the one thing that I think truly saved me from my own period of despair was that I believed the Bible was true. And so I just kept putting myself in the way of his word. And in the pages of God's word, I found the book of Job and I found the Psalms. Especially, they're called the imprecatory Psalms, where you're crying out to the Lord, why, Lord, have you forsaken me? And the beauty that we get to come to a perfect God, and he allows us to ask that question, to basically call God, a deceiver and a liar. And his love is expansive enough to handle that, to go, I know you think that. We both know it's not so, but there is safety and there is space for you to have that experience. And I know how to lead you out.
And then, what does abundance mean, and how does a woman achieve it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we've got ditches on either side of this path, as with most things. So we can bend towards the side that says, as I'm faithful with God, God will be faithful with me, and I'll have plenty of money in the bank, and I'm going to have all these different things that I've been wanting, and there's going to be provision in the natural. And then there's the flip side of that we can bend into, where we basically just kind of believe that there has been almost this correlation between holiness and poverty. Just that God actually would call us to poverty as a way of glorifying him. And I think that God doesn't really look at either of those markers, because we're missing the point when we're looking at money. because the point is abundance of soul, and we need only look to Christ to really see what that looked like. He walked the earth with very little in terms of material possessions, but whenever there was need of material possessions, he told Peter, just go and get a fish and open the fish's mouth, and there will be the 2 coins, one for your taxes and one for mine. And so provision not just for his own needs, but also for Peter's needs as well. And so I believe that abundance really centers around soul abundance, to have this sufficiency that comes directly from the Father, and for us to walk in the truth of the Luke 15 parable of the prodigal son, that the Father says to the elder son, "You have always been with me, and all that I have is yours."
What advice do you have for women considering homeschooling and entrepreneurship, and even maybe a job outside of the home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we talked about how in our family, the center for us is really ministry within the home first. When I talk to women who are considering homeschooling, who are considering working for themselves, who are considering going back to work, so often I think we butt up against this feeling of insufficiency. Life is full already. I have so many responsibilities already. How can I take on one more thing? And I think one of the things that Scripture tells us about the Father is our provision from Him is for the moment that we're living in, that He doesn't give us extra to carry when we don't need it, nor is there lack when we get there. And so our first responsibility is to ask Him, what should I do? Where are we headed? Is this where I'm supposed to go? That being said, as we're walking towards something, we're not going to feel equipped for it. Not until we walk through the door, and even as a homeschool parent, as an entrepreneur, regularly I reach the end of myself and go, there's still more need. There's still more school year to do. There's still more business to be done. And I'm out. I have no vision for what's next. I don't know how to help this child who's struggling to learn this certain thing. My patience is wearing thin. I'm tired. And that's where He expands in my life, because I have that direct line to Him where I'm like, help me. Like, I'm out. I need you to bring your power through my weakness in this moment. And so I think so often we assume we're not able to because we're not able to now, but it's not time until we step into it, and then the provision is there.
Yeah. When a woman's looking to expand her impact for the kingdom, where does she start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I personally feel that expanding my impact for the kingdom always starts at home first. And that doesn't mean that my children get 24/7 of my time. It means that that their needs are well tended, both by me and by my husband. And so that's always where we start. It's that deep and wide idea that we talked about, where the my capacity for patience, my capacity for love, my capacity for empathy expand in the 4 walls of my home, and then I go out from there, and whatever additional space I have. There were seasons when we were first raising our babies where my only capacity for additional ministry was encouraging someone at the grocery store checkout as I was wrangling my 3 and 4 kids. And now there's a little bit more. And so I can do and give more. But sometimes I think we miss how impactful it can be to simply send someone a text and let them know that we're praying for them, that make sure we're actually praying for them, right? Don't just say it and then not pray, but to actually consider someone, even in the midst of very hard seasons or very busy seasons, can be a powerful impact in and of itself. The little things matter. That's one of the things that we talk about in our She Considers a Field community so often, is the little things matter because they're eternal things.
Right. What would you say to yourself 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
looking back?
Oh, I would probably tell myself, don't give up. Don't give up. We think, like I said, we look back and we say, oh, it's been this long already. I've lived this long already. Of course, when you're in your 20s, you feel old. I've lived for so long, Lord, and surely by now. But God is on the 40-year plan. Moses was 80 when he started his ministry in Egypt. And so our scope is often too small. And He really loves I think we think in months and years. God thinks in decades, and he thinks in generations. And so I wish I'd known then, and I would have loved the encouragement. Someone spoke a word over me in my mid-20s, kind of as these deep losses and wounds that I was sitting in were starting to become healed. They said, "You are the point of redemption in your family line." And I think that what God gives to us, he always offers to give through us. So that's a message I carry to other people, is that we all have the opportunity to be the point of redemption in our family line, that there are things that come down generationally. There are wounds that we carry. There are hurts that have happened. Sometimes we'll see like there was an alcoholic grandfather and then an alcoholic father, and then there's addiction in this generation, and that we have the opportunity to say no more. I'm going to lean into the Lord. I'm going to seek to grab hold of all he has to offer. And for me, I think many of the challenges that I faced were, like I said, of my own making, but there was also some generational stuff that had just kind of stayed going, passing down from one generation to the next. And so there was some cleanup work to do. And the Lord put his finger on me and he says, "I'm giving you the opportunity to do it." And it's hard, but it's a privilege. So I think if I had realized then the choices I would make, the healing that I would go through to become whole before the Lord, or more whole before the Lord, that would not only impact my own life, but it was for the generations to follow too. Things that I probably will never even see.
Right. Is there ways that people can get in touch with you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So right now, I'm just starting to kind of share this message of being faithful in little and set over more. And so the primary way that I'm doing that is through a Facebook group called She Considers a Field. And that's for women who love God and want more. They want to be faithful. They want to be, falling in love with him more deeply. And ultimately, one of the things we talk about a lot in there is the power of telling the truth, of telling the Lord, because that's what happened in my 20s. I told him the truth for the first time. My life isn't working. I'm trying so hard and it's not coming together. And so we start there in that community. So that's a great place to connect. And then I'm on Instagram as well, just sharing these thoughts and ideas there too.
Awesome. Well, Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Dorsey, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, guys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we greatly appreciate it. And please like and share and check out Anna's Facebook page and Instagram page. And until next time, thanks for tuning in. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. Please like, share, and tell others about the show. Also, please check out the other podcast episodes. And if you would like, donate to this podcast and buy Dorsey a coffee. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.